The sky above Zythera was a shifting tapestry of colors that no human eye could truly comprehend at first glance. Shades of violet and green rippled across the floating cities like liquid glass, casting long, wavering shadows on the metallic surfaces below. Among these towering structures moved creatures whose elegance seemed almost cruel in its perfection. They walked gracefully, their skin shimmering with psychic resonance, their eyes reflecting intelligence and power beyond human understanding. Yet in the midst of this civilization of flawless beings, there was one who did not belong. Lyra moved quietly along the narrow walkways of the upper cities, her scar hidden beneath the flowing folds of her ceremonial cloak. It was not merely a physical mark, but a symbol of failure, etched by a psychic ritual that had gone awry years ago. To the rest of Zythera's elite, she was nothing more than an embarrassment, a reminder that even in a society obsessed with perfection, imperfection could not be erased entirely. She had become accustomed to avoidance, to whispers behind her back, to the polite cruelty of those who pretended not to notice her. And yet, despite the coldness surrounding her, Lyra held herself with a dignity that only deepened the curiosity she inspired in the few who dared to look. On this day, her steps were slower than usual, weighed down by a sense of isolation that had become all too familiar. The sky above darkened slightly, not with clouds, but with the approach of one of the massive city transport vessels. Its metal hull reflected the light of Zythera's twin suns, and inside it, a small delegation from a distant planet was preparing to land. Among them was Elias Kane, a human envoy from Earth. He was not tall, nor particularly striking by any alien standard, but there was an air about him that the Zytherans would never understand. He carried a quiet confidence, a sense that he belonged anywhere and could handle anything. Elias stepped off the transport, his boots clanging against the metallic walkway. His eyes, wide with curiosity, scanned the floating city. Where the aliens saw perfection and status, he saw opportunity and challenge. Where they saw rules, he saw possibilities. He had been briefed on Zytheran society, on their obsession with psychic skill and perfection, but he had learned one thing before stepping onto this planet. Human adaptability could achieve what the most rigid of societies considered impossible. As he wandered through the city, Elias noticed her. Lyra stood at the edge of a high walkway, her cloak catching the light of the fading sun. There was something about her, he could not name it immediately, but it drew him in. Unlike the others, she did not flaunt her appearance, nor did she radiate the psychic resonance that marked most of Zythera's citizens. Instead, there was an aura of quiet resilience, a subtle energy that seemed to hum in tune with the city yet apart from it. Curiosity overcame caution. Elias moved closer, careful not to startle her. "Excuse me," he said in his own language first, then switched to the Zytheran dialect he had been practicing for months. His accent was rough but comprehensible. "Are you Lyra?" Slowly she turned and her eyes met his. There was no judgment, no fear, no manipulation, only interest. Yes," she replied softly, unsure why she was answering a stranger. "I am Elias Kane," he said, offering a small, genuine smile. "I have come from Earth. I wanted to meet you." Aliens did not approach her without reason. Attention was usually followed by cruelty. And yet there was a warmth in his gaze that she could not ignore. Something about him seemed real, untethered by the petty hierarchies and expectations that dominated her life. "Why me?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Because you are not what they say you are," Elias replied simply. He did not explain further, did not attempt to flatter or manipulate. His words were straightforward, sincere. It was a concept alien to Lyra, whose entire existence had been defined by pretense and fear of judgment. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to consider that someone might see her as more than her failure. She studied him silently, searching for a flaw, a hidden motive. But there was nothing. His expression was open, unguarded. It made her chest tighten, a feeling she had long forgotten. Elias gestured to a quieter walkway below. "May I walk with you?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They moved side by side, the city sprawling around them. Elias spoke little at first, observing, learning the rhythm of her movements, the small signs of tension that she carried unconsciously. Slowly, he began to share stories of Earth, its oceans, mountains, and forests. He described human society not as alien observers might expect, but as a world of adaptability, of creativity, of resilience. Lyra listened, intrigued despite herself. Humans, in her limited experience, were primitive, yet there was something about their approach to life, direct, unpretentious, fearless in ways her society could never comprehend, that fascinated her. You speak as if humans can do anything, Lyra said finally, a hint of skepticism in her voice. Not anything, Elias admitted. But humans can do more than most creatures believe. We improvise. We care, we find ways where others see walls. The sound of a human valuing her for who she was, rather than what she lacked, made a swell of emotions rise within her chest, emotions she had long buried. Trust, curiosity, a flicker of hope. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of a patrol drone, its sensors scanning for unauthorized activity. Lyra instinctively pulled back, her hands tightening around her cloak. Elias, however, remained calm. He gestured for her to follow him, and together they ducked into a narrow corridor leading to one of the city's observation decks. Elias moved with an ease that suggested confidence, even in an alien environment. "You are not afraid?" Lyra whispered, astonished. "Of a machine," Elias replied with a shrug. "Not really. You can learn its patterns, avoid its logic. Fear is wasted energy if you can think. I wanted to find you because I think there is more to you than anyone here has dared to see. And I want to help you discover it." Something deep within her stirred, a feeling that had nothing to do with politics, rules, or psychic perfection. She felt seen, truly seen. "You may walk with me," she said finally, surprising even herself. Elias nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I would be honored." Every so often, he shared a story of human life, how humans valued imperfection, how mistakes could lead to growth, how courage was measured not by skill alone, but by willingness to act despite fear. By the time the twin suns dipped behind the horizon, casting long shadows over the city, Lyra felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her life, she considered the possibility that her scar did not define her, that perhaps, just perhaps, someone could care for her as she was. Elias noticed the change as well. The stiffness in her shoulders had eased, and a tentative trust shimmered in her eyes. It was a subtle thing, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to him it was a signal. A human heart could reach across worlds, could touch even the most guarded of beings. They paused on a high terrace overlooking the glowing streets below. Lyra looked down, then back at Elias, and for a moment no words were necessary. The air between them was filled with a quiet understanding, a fragile connection forged in shared silence and small acts of trust. "Tomorrow," Elias said softly, "I want to learn more about your world, not just the cities, but the stories, the people, the places that matter to you." She had lived for centuries in isolation, but for the first time she looked forward to someone's company. Not out of obligation, not for survival, but because she wanted to. As they parted for the night, Lyra wrapped herself in her cloak and gazed at the stars above. Humans were fragile, humans were strange, but humans could see, they could care. And maybe, just maybe, they could change everything. In that moment, Lyra realized that the human before her was unlike anyone she had ever known. He did not see her scar, her failure, or her exile. He saw her. And in a society that had rejected her, that alone was revolutionary. For the first time in her long life, Lyra allowed herself a small, cautious hope. Perhaps in this human she had found not just curiosity, not just courage, but something more. A beginning. And so, under the alien skies of Zythera, two beings from different worlds took the first step toward something neither could yet name, bound not by obligation or expectation, but by the simple, undeniable power of recognition, respect, and the fragile stirrings of trust. The next morning, Zythera's floating cities shimmered under the twin suns, their metal surfaces glowing like molten crystal. Lyra moved through the streets with more ease than the day before. The scar on her face, usually a mark of shame, felt almost lighter somehow, though she couldn't explain why. Elias' cane had returned, and that alone had shifted something in her. Elias waited near the edge of the lower terrace, looking as ordinary as a human could in comparison to the alien perfection around him. Yet he carried himself with an ease and confidence that set him apart from every Zytheran she had ever known. He waved, and she found herself smiling before she even reached him. "Good morning," he said in his slightly rough voice. "I hope the city hasn't treated you too harshly overnight. There are places I'd like to show you, places the city does not expect anyone to visit." Following him, she found herself stepping into narrow corridors and quiet terraces she had never noticed before, even after centuries on Zythera. There was an ease in Elia's movements, a natural intuition that guided them past patrol drones and surveillance crystals without a single alert. He did not rely on psychic power, yet he seemed to move as though the city itself bent around him. "This is unusual," she said quietly, "even for Zythera." Humans were fragile, that much was obvious. But there was a strength in Elias she could not ignore, a combination of courage and patience that her own people, obsessed with psychic perfection, rarely displayed. She realized with some surprise that she felt safer with him than she had with any Zytheran she had known. They emerged onto a high terrace overlooking the lower city. Below, the streets twisted and flowed like veins, carrying alien traffic in precise choreographed patterns. Elias gestured toward a building partially hidden behind a cascade of light-reflecting panels. "That," he said, "is one of the oldest libraries on Zythera. Most citizens ignore it because it is not considered fashionable. But it contains knowledge the elite prefer to forget, records of the planet's past, old techniques, even some failed psychic experiments. Things that could be useful if you know how to look." "You want to steal knowledge?" she asked, incredulous. "Not steal," he corrected gently. "Access, learn. Sometimes the city itself hides things that are meant to be discovered, not locked away, and we are not asking for permission." She had grown up following rules that made sense to no one but the elite. Elias seemed to bend rules with ease, relying not on power but on cleverness and timing. Inside the library, Elias moved confidently, pointing out texts and artifacts that had been long ignored. Lyra watched in amazement as he handled delicate equipment and translated alien scripts with surprising skill. Despite her initial skepticism, she found herself drawn into his enthusiasm. "You understand this?" she asked, astonished as he explained a series of diagrams showing energy flow patterns her own people had deemed too dangerous to study. "Not fully," he admitted with a smile. "But humans are good at figuring things out step by step. We combine what we know with what we observe. That is often enough." The glow of Zythera shifted, casting long, glittering shadows across the library floor. Elias paused, closing a delicate holographic display. "It is impressive," he said simply, "and dangerous in the wrong hands." Trust was not something she offered lightly. To think that a human, an outsider, could see her as competent, worthy, even admirable was almost overwhelming. She realized her feelings were changing, subtly but undeniably. Before she could dwell on the thought, a warning sound echoed through the library. A patrol drone had detected them. Lyra's first instinct was to panic, but Elias remained calm. He whispered instructions, guiding her through hidden corridors and maintenance shafts. Every step, every turn was precise, yet improvised in ways no Zytheran could anticipate. They emerged on a secluded terrace above the city, far from the drone's sensors. Lyra was breathless, part from exertion, part from awe. How do you do this?" she asked, astonished. "Observation," Elias said simply. "And adaptability. Humans notice patterns, and when something breaks the pattern, we adjust. Aliens often rely on perfection and repetition. That is why they underestimate us." And yet here was one, capable of navigating her world better than almost anyone she had known. She began to see a new possibility. That imperfection did not mean weakness. That courage and cleverness mattered as much as psychic skill or genetic perfection. They returned to the city streets under the fading light, careful to avoid observation. Lyra found herself speaking freely now, telling Elias about moments from her past, the isolation, the ridicule, the endless pressure to conform. He listened without interruption, his responses measured and thoughtful. "Your society," he said finally, "values perfection above all else, but perfection does not make you wise, it does not make you kind. It does not make you free." "Do you really understand me?" she asked softly. "I try," Elias replied. "I cannot know everything you feel, every fear you carry, but I can see you, and sometimes seeing is the first step toward understanding." Yet here was a human who not only saw her, but valued her, even thrived in her presence. It was a revelation that both thrilled and frightened her. Elias noticed the subtle shift, the way her posture relaxed, the way her eyes reflected something new. "You are stronger than you know," he said gently, "and I am here to help you see it." She had never experienced encouragement so freely, without expectation or judgment. She felt herself leaning slightly toward him, a pull she did not understand, yet did not resist. They walked in silence for a time, the sounds of the city below blending with the hum of distant machinery and the faint whisper of the wind. Each step, each shared glance deepened the bond forming between them. Lyra realized that she was beginning to trust him completely, not just his skills, but his intentions, his presence, his very existence in her life. By the time they returned to her secluded quarters, the city was bathed in soft moonlight, and the stars above reflected in the glassy metal surfaces around them. Lyra turned to Elias, her expression unreadable, yet open. "You are unlike anyone I have ever known," she said quietly. "And you are unlike anyone I have ever met," he replied. "Maybe that is why we understand each other." The human's presence, his courage, his empathy was enough. As Elias departed for the night, promising to return in the morning, Lyra allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, a feeling she had thought lost forever. Humans were fragile, yes, but they were also clever, brave, and capable of change. And perhaps, just perhaps, one human could change everything for her. She watched him disappear into the city lights, feeling a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. Tomorrow, she would learn more, not just about the human, but about herself. And for the first time in her life, she felt that she had someone who believed in her. Under the alien skies, Lyra felt something new and fragile awaken, a connection that had nothing to do with her scar, her failures, or her past. It was the start of something dangerous, exciting, and utterly human: trust, admiration, and the possibility of love. And in that moment, Lyra understood that sometimes, the most remarkable strength came not from perfection, but from the courage to see beyond it. The morning light fell pale over Zythera's floating cities, reflecting off the polished metal walkways and the glowing surfaces of the towers. The air was thick with the hum of psychic energy, a subtle vibration that almost everyone on the planet could sense. But Lyra, with her scar, felt it differently: less control, less connection, and more isolation. She had grown used to it, and yet today there was something different. Elias Kane arrived just as the sun peeked over the horizon, his human stride confident and purposeful. He carried a small bag, filled with tools and instruments that seemed strange and simple to the Zytherans, but which he used with ease and precision. Lyra noticed the calm in his movements, the way he navigated the city as if it were designed for him, not against him. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady, with a warmth she had begun to rely on. "Are you ready to see more of your world differently? Something that may change the way you see your place in Zythera?" When they reached an old, abandoned district, the contrast with the upper city was stark. Buildings leaned at odd angles, some half-collapsed, with vegetation creeping through cracks. The air was quieter here, less buzzing with psychic resonance, almost peaceful. "This place was once thriving," Elias explained. "The records say it held some of the most brilliant minds in Zythera's history. But it fell into disuse because it didn't meet current standards. The city values perfection over progress, so the past was left behind." It was a side of her world she had never known, hidden from the elite, ignored because it was imperfect. Elias led her to a small building, its entrance partly blocked by debris. "We'll need to be careful," he said. "This place hasn't been touched in centuries, but there's knowledge here that could help you and me." Lyra's eyes widened as she saw shelves lined with ancient texts, holographic projectors, and devices she could barely name. It was a treasure trove of forgotten science and technology. "Do you understand how this works?" she asked, amazed, as Elias activated a small console with a flick of his hand. "Some of it," he admitted, "but humans have a way of figuring things out. We combine observation, experimentation, and a little luck. Often, that is enough to make sense of even the most complicated systems." She began to understand what he meant about human ingenuity. He did not have psychic abilities, genetic perfection, or centuries of training in her society, yet he could manipulate systems that her own kind avoided. "This is remarkable," she said quietly. "Even our elite would hesitate to touch these. They fear failure. And we adapt. Fear does not stop us, it guides us." Not only was she learning things about her own world that she had never known, but she was also learning something more profound: that her value was not defined by the expectations of others. As they worked, Lyra began to open up further, telling Elias stories from her past, her failures in the psychic rituals, the way the elite had shunned her, and the loneliness that had become her constant companion. Elias listened, never interrupting, never judging. He asked questions not to mock, but to understand. And slowly, Lyra realized she was beginning to trust him completely. But even as she allowed herself to feel this connection, danger was brewing. In the upper city, officials had begun to notice her absence and Elias' presence. Whispers spread quickly among the elite, fueled by suspicion and fear. Lyra's scar had always marked her as weak, but now, with a human involved, the elite feared the unpredictable. They could not understand him, and that made him dangerous in their eyes. By mid-afternoon, Elias and Lyra returned to the upper terraces. The city seemed normal, but Lyra sensed tension in the air. She could feel the subtle glances, the whispers of drones tracking movement, and the silent calculations of those who believed themselves superior. "Something is wrong," she murmured, instinctively scanning the streets. Elias nodded. "I think our presence has been noticed. The elite do not like surprises, and we are one." He did not have the psychic sense that the Zytherans relied on, yet he navigated their city better than most citizens ever could. Soon, they arrived at a secluded observation deck overlooking the main plaza. From here, Lyra could see the elite gathering, their expressions hard, their movements coordinated. It was a silent judgment, a reminder that she had always been an outsider. "They are planning something," Elias said quietly. "We need to be ready." He moved with precision, guiding her to a narrow corridor hidden behind a panel. The drone passed without detecting them. "You are fearless," Lyra whispered, astonished. "I am careful," he said with a small smile. "Humans are not fearless. We are aware of danger. We just refuse to let it control us." There was a difference, subtle but important, between courage and recklessness. Elias embodied the first, not the second. That night they met in a quiet chamber within Lyra's residence. She had prepared the space herself, something small but comfortable. Elias studied the room with interest, noting the arrangements of objects, the layout of the space, and the subtle defenses she had installed. "You have thought of everything," he said, impressed. "Even with the limitations they impose, you have created a place where you are safe. You are not defined by their judgment." "Tomorrow," she said, "we should return to the old district. There is more to explore, more knowledge to uncover, and perhaps more understanding to gain." Lyra felt a cautious excitement she had never known, a flicker of hope that perhaps she could exist in this world not as an outcast, but as someone capable, someone seen, someone valued. Meanwhile, in the upper city, whispers turned into plans. The elite could not comprehend the humans' influence, nor could they tolerate Lyra's increasing confidence. Rumors spread of her alliance with a being from Earth, and the Council began to consider measures to contain both of them. Unaware of the full scope of the threat, Lyra and Elias prepared for another day of exploration. The humans' presence was a revelation, a disruption to the rigid society of Zythera. Lyra began to understand that strength came not only from psychic power or perfection, but from courage, ingenuity, and the ability to act despite fear. As the city settled into night, she reflected on the hours spent with Elias. She had laughed, she had learned, and for the first time she had felt a connection that went beyond fear and obligation. The world was vast, and her place in it uncertain, but with him she felt capable of facing anything. And Elias, as he walked back to his quarters under the alien stars, thought of Lyra in return. He had come to Zythera expecting a mission of diplomacy, but what he had found was extraordinary. A being scarred by society, rejected by tradition, yet capable of brilliance, insight, and courage. Humans had underestimated the aliens, and now perhaps the aliens would underestimate them both. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The city would not remain passive, and the elite would act to protect their power. But for now, there was a fragile peace, a quiet understanding, and the unspoken promise of trust and partnership. And in the heart of the floating city, two beings from different worlds took the first steps toward a future neither could yet predict, bound together by curiosity, respect, and the slow, steady growth of something powerful and undeniably human. The morning sun rose pale and steady over Zythera, casting long reflections across the floating city towers. The twin suns lit the streets, revealing the elegance of the upper city, the flawless architecture, the glowing panels, and the citizens moving with calculated grace. Yet beneath the surface of perfection, tension thrummed. The council had taken notice of Lyra's alliance with Elias Kane, the human, and unease spread quickly among the elite. Lyra felt the change immediately. Whispers followed her through the corridors, subtle but pointed. Faces turned as she passed, though eyes looked away at the last moment. She was no longer invisible. The human had altered how the elite perceived her, and that alone caused a ripple of fear. She did not need to understand their reasoning, she only felt the weight of it. Elias arrived shortly after sunrise, his presence a calm contrast to the undercurrent of scrutiny. "We need to be cautious today," he said quietly. "They will be watching, but we can turn their attention to our advantage." Elias moved with a natural confidence, his intuition guiding them past obstacles the elite would have considered impassable. Each step reinforced Lyra's belief that humans could achieve what the aliens underestimated. They reached the lower district, the one they had explored previously. Buildings leaned slightly, weathered by time and neglect. Dust filled the air, carrying the faint scent of old machinery and ancient knowledge. Here, perfection did not matter. Here, failure had been allowed to exist, and with it, opportunity. Elias guided Lyra through a series of corridors, leading them to a room filled with relics of Zythera's past. Old energy conduits hummed faintly, holographic projections flickered on cracked walls, and mechanical devices lined the shelves. Each artifact was a testament to innovation that had been abandoned for the sake of conformity. "This place," Elias said, "is proof that even in a society obsessed with perfection, imperfection can create something extraordinary. Humans understand that better than most species. We see value where others see weakness." Elias demonstrated his human ingenuity, connecting circuits and analyzing data in ways that were unexpected but effective. Lyra followed, initially hesitant, then gradually participating, adjusting devices, observing energy flows, and recording findings. Hours passed, and the light outside shifted. The twin suns began to set, casting the city in long, sharp shadows. Their quiet study was interrupted by the faint, high-pitched whir of a patrol drone. Lyra froze, but Elias remained calm. "Follow me," he whispered. He led her through hidden maintenance shafts, bypassing the drone's sensors with subtle movements. They emerged on a terrace overlooking the city plaza. From this vantage point, they could see the elite gathered below, their posture stiff with tension. "They are planning something," Elias said. His tone was quiet but urgent. "They will try to undermine you today. We need to act before they do." She had grown accustomed to being dismissed, ignored, or ridiculed, but now she felt the pressure of the elite's attention focused squarely on her. Yet, with Elias beside her, fear was tempered by strategy. She had begun to understand that the human's power was not in psychic ability or perfection, but in thinking, adapting, and acting under pressure. Elias scanned the plaza and noticed an energy barrier being erected around the council chambers. He smiled faintly. "They are confident," he said. "They think the human presence will intimidate them, but humans do not follow fear in the same way. We improvise." Lyra watched as he calibrated it, explaining step by step. "We are not breaking the law technically," he said. "We are simply creating a distraction, a way to draw their attention away from what we are doing here." She followed his instructions carefully, connecting wires, adjusting circuits, and monitoring the energy flows. The device hummed to life, sending subtle pulses into the network. Below, the council members reacted almost immediately. Alarms went off, guards moved, and confusion spread like wildfire. The elite had underestimated both the human and the outcast alien. The moment of hesitation was enough. Elias guided Lyra to another console, showing her how to amplify the device's signal. "We have only a short window," he said. "Act with confidence. Humans succeed when we trust ourselves." Energy flows shifted, holographic displays flickered, and the council's carefully maintained image of control began to falter. Aliens who had relied on predictability were confused, uncertain, and vulnerable. Lyra felt a surge of exhilaration. For the first time, she was not merely reacting to her environment, she was shaping it. Her intelligence, combined with Elia's ingenuity, had created a moment of opportunity. She could feel the human advantage, adaptability, courage, and strategy working through her. Suddenly, a warning flashed across a nearby console. Another faction of the council had noticed the interference and was sending a security team. Lyra's first instinct was panic, but Elias remained calm. "Stay with me," he said. He guided her through narrow service corridors, avoiding detection until they reached a small observation platform above the plaza. From here, they could see the unfolding chaos below. "They cannot predict human thinking," Elias said quietly. "They are rigid structured, we are flexible. That is our advantage." "Do you really think we can win against them?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "We already are winning," Elias replied. "Winning is not about defeating them physically. It is about proving that their assumptions are wrong, and they are very wrong." She had always been taught that her failures marked her as weak, that she had no place among the elite. But here she was capable. Here her actions mattered. With Elias guiding her, she was more than an outcast. She was a force to be reckoned with. The security team moved closer, and Elias gestured for her to follow him to a hidden exit. They slipped through narrow passages, emerging in a quieter part of the city. Lyra's heart pounded, but she felt exhilarated. She was no longer the powerless figure the elite had dismissed for centuries. She was part of something larger, something important. As they paused to catch their breath, Elias looked at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "You did well today," he said. "Better than you realize. Your mind is sharp and your instincts are strong. Humans succeed when they combine knowledge with courage. You are doing exactly that." I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't need to say anything," Elias replied. "Actions speak louder than words. Today we acted, and that is enough." She realized that she was enjoying herself, perhaps for the first time in centuries. By the time they returned to her quarters, the stars above Zythera shimmered faintly, reflecting off the metallic towers. Lyra paused at the door, looking at Elias. "Tomorrow," she began, but hesitated, unsure what to say. "Tomorrow," he said with a gentle smile, "we continue, we learn, we explore. And we prove that humans, when underestimated, can achieve extraordinary things." And in combination with her own intelligence, they were unstoppable. As Elias left for the night, Lyra stood at the window, gazing at the city below. The elite may have been plotting against her, may have underestimated the human's influence, but she felt unshakable. For the first time, she realized that her scar did not define her. Her failures did not limit her. With the human at her side, she could face any challenge. And somewhere deep inside, Lyra felt a spark she could not yet name. Trust, admiration, something more. It stirred quietly, building with each passing day. The human had shown her that she was seen, valued, and capable. And that knowledge was more powerful than any psychic ritual, any council decree, any mark of shame. The city slept below, but Lyra's mind was awake, alive with possibility. Tomorrow, the challenges would continue, and the elite would act to restore their control. But she was no longer the same outcast they had dismissed. She was stronger. She was capable. And she had a human ally whose presence reminded her that even in a world obsessed with perfection, courage, ingenuity, and heart could change everything. As the night deepened, Lyra finally allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow, the city would test them. But she knew with a certainty that filled her chest that humans, and she herself, were ready. The sun rose over Zythera, pale and sharp, casting long, glittering reflections on the floating city towers. The twin suns highlighted every curve, every polished surface, and every citizen moving through the streets with their usual grace. Yet beneath this perfection, tension simmered. The council had decided they could not allow Lyra and the human, Elias Kane, to continue unchecked. Their influence, their partnership, threatened the rigid order that had ruled Zythera for centuries. Lyra woke early, the weight of anticipation heavy on her shoulders. She had trained herself to expect isolation, betrayal, and scorn. But today she felt something new, a quiet certainty that she was no longer powerless. Elias had arrived at the terrace before dawn, waiting with calm determination. "Today will be challenging," he said softly, "but remember what we have learned. Humans succeed when we are underestimated, when we adapt, and when we trust each other." She had spent centuries fearing her own shadow, yet here, beside a human who saw her for who she truly was, she felt ready. She understood with growing clarity that courage did not come from perfection or psychic power. It came from action, from thinking beyond fear, and from the willingness to act even when failure seemed certain. They moved through the city, carefully avoiding patrol drones and elite observers. Every alleyway and terrace they traversed was a lesson in observation, improvisation, and patience. Lyra marveled at Elias' ability to navigate the city, without psychic guidance, without centuries of training. He could anticipate every obstacle, every hidden threat. He was unshakable yet adaptable, a combination she had never seen in her people. They reached a hidden courtyard near the council chambers. Elias pointed to an old control hub, partially forgotten and overlooked by the elite. "This is our chance," he whispered. "We can disrupt their plans before they even begin." The council had begun to deploy forces to isolate her, to prevent her from acting. Today would be the first real test of her courage, her skills, and the human ingenuity she had begun to admire so deeply. Elias worked quickly, instructing her on the use of human tools and strategies. They activated hidden circuits and rerouted energy flows. The systems they engaged were complex, ancient, and forbidden, yet under Elias' guidance, Lyra found herself acting with confidence. Each movement, each decision was a small act of defiance against the society that had rejected her. Below, the council began to realize that something was wrong. Alarms blared, guards moved with confusion, and the elite whispered urgently among themselves. They had underestimated the human's ingenuity and Lyra's growing confidence. Elias guided her to a console where she could participate directly. "This is your moment," he said. "Act with confidence, trust your instincts." Instead, it seemed to respond to her, as if acknowledging her presence and her right to act. She followed Elia's instructions, making adjustments with precision. The system responded perfectly. From the terraces above, the council watched helplessly as their carefully maintained order unraveled. Holographic displays flickered, security protocols failed, and the guards were forced into confusion. Their rigid, perfection-obsessed methods could not account for human unpredictability, nor for the combination of Elia's intuition and Lyra's growing skill. Lyra felt a rush of exhilaration. For the first time, she was not just reacting, she was controlling the outcome. She was shaping her world in ways the elite had thought impossible. And beside her, Elias moved with quiet confidence, his presence reassuring, his strategies flawless. "Do you see?" he asked softly. "They cannot predict us. They cannot control us. They have relied on rigidity for centuries, but humans and outcasts, we improvise." For centuries, she had believed herself powerless, a failure marked by her scar. But now, in the heat of action, she realized that her scar did not define her. Her intelligence, courage, and skill were her own, and when combined with human ingenuity, they could accomplish what the elite considered impossible. As the council scrambled to regain control, Elias and Lyra continued their work. They bypassed security protocols, redirected energy flows, and created diversions that drew attention away from the key systems they needed to access. Every step was precise, yet unpredictable, a combination the elite could not anticipate. Finally, they reached the core of the council's control system. Elias gestured to Lyra. "This is it. We stabilize this, and their plans for today collapsed completely." Their attempts to isolate Lyra and the human had failed. Their perfect plans were undone by unpredictability, courage, and clever thinking. Lyra felt a surge of triumph. She had always been scorned and dismissed, but today she had proven her worth, not through perfection, not through psychic skill, but through intelligence, bravery, and the trust she placed in Elias. Elias smiled at her. "You did it," he said. "Not me, you. Humans help, yes, but your skill, your instincts, they made this possible." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the city, the elite began to retreat, their authority shaken. The human and the outcast had proven that even in a society obsessed with perfection, ingenuity and courage could prevail. Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes reflecting the glow of the city lights. I never thought anyone would see me like this," she said softly. "Not my failures, not my scar, but me as I am." It was a smile born of recognition, trust, and something more, something that neither human nor alien could name, but both felt deeply. They walked together across the terrace, their hands brushing, their presence beside each other a quiet declaration. The city below may have been filled with whispers and judgment, but up here under the twin suns they were free. Free to act, free to think, and free to trust each other completely. Elias looked at her, eyes steady. "Do you know why humans succeed, even when we seem weak? And sometimes, we inspire others to do the same." The city was quiet now, the elite regrouping, but their power had been challenged, shaken, and diminished. Lyra felt a sense of triumph, not just for the victory, but for the recognition of her own worth. Elias looked at her with a smile. "You have changed today," he said. "Not just the city, not just the council, but yourself. And you have shown me that humans are not what I expected. That courage, ingenuity, and trust can change everything." Elias reached for her hand again, holding it gently but firmly. "We face challenges tomorrow, no doubt, but for now, we have one, together." And she trusted him in return. As the night deepened and the city slept below, Lyra allowed herself to rest, not in fear, but in hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, yes, but she knew, with Elias beside her, they could face anything. Humans, she realized, were underestimated not because they were weak, but because they were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of seeing what others could not. And in that realization, Lyra felt a new strength awaken within her. She was no longer merely the scarred, rejected outcast. She was seen, she was capable, and she was loved. The twin moons rose above the city, casting silver light across the towers. Lyra and Elias stood together on the terrace, side by side, looking out over the city that had once rejected her. It was a new beginning, a future shaped not by fear or perfection, but by courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable bond of trust and respect. And as they stood there, the weight of centuries of rejection and isolation lifted. Lyra knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never again be defined by what others saw as her flaws. She was whole, she was capable, and she had found a human who saw her for exactly who she was and loved her for it. Under the alien skies of Zythera, two beings from different worlds had changed everything. Not through power alone, not through psychic perfection, but through courage, intelligence, trust, and heart. And in that, the human advantage had triumphed, showing that sometimes the greatest strength comes from the simplest of truths, seeing, trusting, and believing in each other.